more yeses you say, other things unfold to where you have opportunities for other yeses.
Yeah.
But in that, you also, I feel like you have to know the no's too.
That's good.
For sure.
Because every no leads to the right yes.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't realize is when you are experiencing, whether it's your emotional, spiritual, physical issues later on in life, you have to know the root of the problem probably lies 10, 15 years before that. And then once I figure that out, I have to go, okay, what are the methods, exercises, stretches, things that I've got to do to correct the problem that, oh, by the way, it may take a year, 2 years. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rooted Podcast, where if you want to get the fruit, you got to
get to the root.
Come on, man.
Yes, sir.
Today's a special episode. We want to try to do this every now and then. We want to do a special Q&A episode. And in fact, you guys can help us with our next Q&A episode. If you are listening on Spotify, if you will go to the show description, you'll see there's some comment section. You can actually leave us a question if you want to talk about anything, whether it's life-related, ministry-related, for us to kind of just sit and shoot from the hip and ask some questions or answer some questions. We'd love for you to do that. Also, if you're listening from Apple, you can do the same thing. There's actually a place on the show description where you can text a number, and we'll actually be able to get your text from that show description. But we'd love to hear from you. What do you guys want to talk about? You know, I think there are things that we're passionate about that we always want to talk about. But what I know is that we have listeners from all walks of life. There are some who are in ministry, some who are not. Maybe there are some who are listening who maybe aren't even like believers, or you're borderline Christians and you're kind of trying to figure this thing out, and you just love the conversations that we've been having. And so if that's you, feel free to send us a question too. And then maybe the next Q&A episode, we'll pull some of those questions and dive into that. But
and if you're watching on YouTube, put it in the comments down there.
Put it in the comments.
Let's go.
Or
YouTube
questions
people.
in there. YouTube people. Yeah. So, yeah, if you're one of those people that, for whatever reason, you don't like listening to people, but you like watching us.
people talk.
Yeah, I don't know, watching people. But no, it's, man, so far, I just want to thank everybody who has been tuning in. Just incredible feedback. Man, I've been so honored and humbled at how many people said that the podcast has been helpful. Some really cool news coming your way.
Oh, yes.
Tyler, tell them what we've got coming up soon.
We're talking about swag.
That's right.
We have some Rooted swag. We have some hats.
That's right.
Some shirts they're nice and they're comfortable.
Yeah.
They don't shrink when you wash them. Like we really spend some time on this. So, look out for that. Some Rooted shirts and some hats coming your way.
I think in the future too, we're going to work on some coffee mugs, stuff
cups.
like that. Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Just some simple stuff. But if you're a fan of the show, maybe you can kind of help spread the word by wearing some hats, T-shirts, drinking whatever you drink in your mugs. I don't know. Maybe there's some tea people out there. Dustin's a tea person.
He puts coffee creamer in his tea.
Well, his son puts coffee creamer in a cup and just drinks that.
Just creamer, okay.
So, any just creamer fans out there? I don't know. Like, I've heard of like black coffee people, but there's not many just like creamer people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're out there though.
I mean, they are. But, I feel like maybe that's like, how people like strawberry milk and chocolate milk? Mm-hmm. You can buy like Irish milk, French vanilla milk, hazelnut milk.
Okay. Maybe they're on to something.
Maybe. I'm just kidding. It's not. I would not encourage that. 100%. But, Dustin likes tea and his son likes creamer. Yeah. So it's whatever. But no, we're excited today to have a special guest on. Reed Parker is joining us today, all the way from Mountain Home, Arkansas.
Representing.
So just to kind of let you guys know, Reed is 24 years old.
Got it.
Yeah. And for you ladies watching out there, he's single.
Yes.
Yeah, he's very single. Yeah.
Very single.
I have a dog. I have a dog. Get
There's
out of here,
single
dude.
and very single.
Yeah.
Very single is the one people who have a dog.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's very single.
I have dog candles too. So
Yeah,
that's
you did.
that's
That was a whole
new-
experience.
We're not
that's
going to tell
new-
that story today,
All right.
but yeah, he has a dog candle. But no, I am excited. Reed is joining us for a residency internship. So he's with us for 10 months. Reed feels called into ministry. Reed, tell us just a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah. Kind of my big intro. I'm from Arkansas. accepted my calling when I was about 17, and then went and just told God, like, this is what I'm going to do with my life. You know, this is my life is a blank check, you know, everything he's done for me. And so went through college, kind of came out of college with this weird, you know, small town vibe of, you know, everyone I know is this like family tree of ministers. And so it's kind of like they expect their son to fill these positions. And so in this small town, you know, you're left with this calling and this dream. And then you're like, well, what do I do with it from here? You know? So wrestled with God through that, through different seasons, different jobs, found myself in really good community with people just continually pushing me forward. And so through that, I found you guys all the way here in Tennessee, and, you know,
God's country.
Yeah, God's country.
Go Vols.
Oh, wow. Woo Pig all the way. Anyway, just wrestled with God through that of like, what's next? And then talked to you guys about this residency position and really felt, you know, nervous to leave my family. You know, they're 8 hours away, but felt a piece of God being like, I need this to be your next step. And so that's just what brought me here.
Yeah, that's so awesome, man. We've been honored to have you so far. Like you've been here almost a month, and you fit right in, man, your family. Just been meeting with Reed, like consistently, kind of having conversations around ministry. He's basically been shadowing myself, Pastor Dustin, the staff, joining right in, serving in our team. And so I told him, I said, hey, man, I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask whatever you want to ask, ministry-wise, personal-wise, and we're going to do it on the podcast. And so we're going to see what kind of questions Reed has for Tyler and myself. And to let you guys know, we have no idea what he's going to ask, and but we're going to do our best to answer it and help maybe get to some root of the problems here. So, yeah.
Sweet.
Whenever you're ready.
Oh, yeah, man. So when I sat down, I started thinking about this. One of the things kind of just being new and getting to know people is I haven't had really a formal chance to just sit down and ask you your story. So, like, I'd love to hear, like, what your yes was. Like, when you knew you're like, this is what I want to do. This is my calling. And so, like, I just kind of want to start there. Like, what's your yes?
Yeah. Go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah. So I grew up in church. My grandfather was a pastor. My dad was a pastor. He still is. Grew up in church my entire life. I got saved when I was 6 years old. This is hilarious, and my mom would kill me if I tell this often. So my dad, there was a church that was, my dad came in and preached, and they were like going to vote on him the next Wednesday to see if he would be the pastor or whatever. Well, that night of his like trial time or whatever, I'm like, Mom, I need to go to the altar. And my mom goes, no, hush. Because it was like, oh, it's her. No. But yeah, dude, it's hilarious. And she's going to kill me every time I share the story. But long story short, that night, I got saved when I was 6 years old in my bedroom. I'll never forget it. And it was awesome. It's a funny story, but it's also a beautiful story. So I got saved and baptized when I was 6 years old. And then from 6 to 18, you know, just this whole concept of, you know, you go to church on Sunday, Wednesday, you know, that's kind of what it was for me growing up. And then when I was a senior in high school, I was 18 years old. I've heard about Generation Church coming to Portland. Pastor Brandon, you were in my dad's student ministry for a little while. No,
but I knew your dad, you know, from when I got saved, and
oddly enough, right before the church started, met him at Coy, just ran into each other, and my parents have been super supportive of everything that I'm doing. But just felt this, man, there's more. So I came to GC on 3/4/12 on launch day, and I had that that second another awakening moment of like, there is so much more out here than just attending church. And so this idea of serving, this idea of being part of a community and doing life with one another and chasing Jesus. And so when I was 18 on that Easter, I got baptized because this is going to sound, I don't remember my baptism. And like just knowing of like, okay, this is a decision I'm making moving forward. So I got baptized on Easter Sunday, which is when our church went to 2 experiences on that Sunday, which was a really cool day. And then from that moment on of really discovering and uncovering what following Jesus, like actively following him. And then I joined the worship team about 3 months into that. And just, again, this just call. I was in a band and felt like God was calling me to something, but really didn't know what that what that meant. And I just try to be obedient, recognize his voice and say yes. And been here ever since. And now I'm just going on 3 years of full-time student ministry. And again, just never would have thought that. But just being available, that's our word for the year as a church. And like, if this is God, if this is what you want me to do, I trust you. Yeah. And it's easier said than done sometimes. But yeah. Got married when I was 21, got 3 kids, and now my wife is awesome. She runs alongside of me. And so that's a little bit of my story and the time that we have.
Sweet.
Well, and it's cool. Like, Tyler's a testimony of like, just say yes in the moment. I think so many people, when they think of their calling, they act like it's maybe a very specific, like peg that it's got to fit in this peg. And I think what we forget is like, we are called to honor God with our lives. We're called to serve. Now, we all have giftings that help equip and help edify the local church. Yeah. But, I don't think it was funny. I remember the day that I asked Tyler, I was like, have you ever considered youth ministry? He like literally laughed out loud.
I was like, he
thought I was joking. And I'm like, no, man, I'm being serious. Yeah.
I answered, then you walked away. I'm like, okay. I don't know what this means.
So, but no, he's a perfect example of that, and went through a lot of bumps and bruises for the first year, but now seeing him 3 years in, it's been incredible to watch his growth and maturity. So, I think so many people, they will end up not doing anything for the kingdom because they are waiting on a very clear, crisp, perfect answer to the question, and they end up like not being faithful in small things that could have led to an open door, which is kind of my story. Like, I did not grow up in church. I had an opposite story. And so when I was in high school, I had to go live with my aunt and uncle because my mother was in prison and my father wasn't around. And they basically forced us to go to church, and there wasn't a lot of Jesus at home. Yeah. But, we lived in the South, and my uncle was a deacon at the church that we attended, a little small country church in Adolphus, Kentucky. And, but like I said, it was 2 different worlds. You had church world and you had home world. And so like, I hated going to church. Like, we would try to find any excuse not to go. Long story short, I got saved when I was 18, and something within me there was literally only like 4 or 5 teenagers in our entire church. And I just went to my pastor and I was like, first of all, I just want to serve at any capacity. I was there every time the church doors were open. Like, if it was Sunday night, I was there. Wednesday night, I was there. If there was anything going on the weekends, revival, whatever it was. And I just remember I said, hey, on Wednesday nights, could I just like meet with some of the teenagers in the church and just like, let's just have conversations, like whether it's, questions about the Bible, even though I didn't know the Bible, I can't tell you what ministry was. I didn't know what ministry was. I just knew, like, all of a sudden I had this zeal about Jesus that I wanted to sit around with other people my age and talk about it. And so I started doing that. It didn't last very long because teenagers aren't very committed to much, at the time. Bless their hearts, But that turned into slowly like, hey, we did a thing before Sunday school where it was like you met as a congregation. The Sunday school superintendent like gave the devotion, you prayed, and then you split off into Sunday school. Well, he's like, hey, do you want to read the devotion every week and kind of take on this role of just read the devotion? You basically just read it out of the book. Like, they have a book with the curriculum, and then you pray and dismiss people. And that takes like 7 minutes. But I'd be up there for like 20 minutes because I'd be elaborating. Man, I'm telling you what, like, I would just start ad-libbing, and the people would be like, it's like high energy in the room, and we'd dismiss, and he's like, well, we're 30 minutes into this. We haven't even started Sunday school yet.
We're already running over.
Yeah, already running over. Yeah, not much has changed. But anyways, I just remember I wanted to do whatever it took. And then he was like, hey, do you want to lead youth? And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? He's like, well, it's from birth to high school.
That's youthful for
sure.
So
so my first introduction to youth ministry was like, what do we do with kids? Because we didn't have kids ministry back then. So it was like usually extracurricular stuff. And I remember I invited a guy named Jody Brown to come speak at like one of our very first little youth events. And because I didn't know what youth ministry was. I didn't even know you could have a youth ministry. I just knew, like, hey, they said you can do some stuff with kids. And, dude, he was such a great communicator. And so I didn't know that a friend of mine from high school actually went to his church and was in his youth ministry. So he invites me to their vacation Bible school where they had like a legit youth ministry. And so I go and I'm just like, what is this? I'm like, you're not allowed to do this stuff. Like, this is crazy. What kind of music is this? This is incredible. Like, it was the first time I heard anything like contemporary or whatever. And this is like early 2000s, y'all. So, I mean, you're talking about Stephen Curtis Chapman, DC Talk back then. DC Talk, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Michael W. Smith. We're talking about this era. Man, I started serving in that youth ministry, and dude, I just fell in love with like trying to reach students. Because I remember I told my pastor a year after I got saved, like I feel like because he told me, he's like, man, I think you have a gift, because like when you start talking, like people just are engaged. And so I told him, I was like, man, I feel like I'm called to be a preacher or whatever. And so he legit turns to me and says, okay, you're up next Sunday night. And it was like, what?
Okay.
Yeah. So, like, even my yes looks a little bit different because I thought that I would be in student ministry all of my days. I never dreamed of being a pastor or a church planter. But I feel like every yes opens another door to, like, multiple other opportunities and things like that. And that's why I just tell people, like, the more yeses you say, other things unfold to where you have opportunities for other yeses. Yeah. But in that, you also, I feel like you have to know the no's too.
That's good.
For sure.
Because every no leads to the right yes.
Yeah.
So.
Sweet. Yeah. I really appreciate y'all sharing.
Man.
You actually transitioned perfectly into my next question because I love asking about people's yeses and like hearing where they start off, but I do think hearing about no's is important. And so my next question would be, as a believer or just a leader for the non-believers too, like, how do you handle a no? Because, you can step into ministry and you can say yes, or like, I think people do forget that, sometimes you go to God for things and he's like, no, and so how do you handle a no? What's a good door to open? What's a good outlook on it? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think for me, the Bible talks a lot about being set apart. So I think I think you can handle a no when it comes to like, when in that conversation of being set apart, like if someone asks you to do something or whatever, you can be like, no, almost like an arrogance about yourself. Well, I'm not doing that. I'm a Christian, or I'm not doing that. But like, I think for me, for my no's, hopefully they come with conversation. It's like, hey, I'm gonna set this out, and here's why. When it comes to like being set apart as a follower of Christ, but also saying no to things. We have this conversation often about like how saying no to certain things on Saturday night because of what Sunday morning looks like, or like saying no to this because, hey, we're prioritizing, this is a family night, and this time has been marked. Because again, just always explaining why. But I think the way that it comes across, I was like, no, man, I can't. Are you confident in your no's? That's what I think of about a no's, and then even saying no to things I enjoy doing. Like, I still serve on the worship team. Yeah. But I'm intentional with those. And sometimes they have to be a no. I tell Doug, I was like, hey, man, twice a month on Sundays, because I want to be available for parents, and I have a great team and all those things on the weekends as well. Yeah. Again, it's saying no to things so I can say yes to other things. Well,
and if I'm hearing you correctly, I think you're asking like, how do you handle someone telling you no? Is that what you're asking? Is like in ministry, as you're chasing your calling, so to speak, there are times when no is said to you. Is that what you're asking?
No, I think Tyler kind of hit the no in general, gotcha. Because sometimes, like you get it like, man, I really want that job promotion, and it's a no, or man, I wish I could afford this car, and it's a no. Or it could be, God.
So I think it's both, right? Yeah, it's both. Yeah. So here's what I tell my son. I just had this conversation with him the other day. Like, you are not at a place in your life where you have the emotional maturity or the mental maturity to say no for yourself. Yeah. When you are immature, you will say yes to everything that comes your way. Mm-hmm. So here, I could attest to this even in my 20s. I tell this joke. It's not a joke. My life was a joke back then, but it's funny now. It's a joke now. But nobody ever taught me how to be a good steward of my money. Yeah. And so I would look at how I could afford something as to like, is there money left over after I say yes to this? If so, it didn't matter how much. It just, hey, that's a pretty good decision. I still got some money left. I didn't understand cash flow, didn't understand any of that stuff. And so, like, I tell this all the time, but, like, man, I remember when the PlayStation 2 came out, y'all. Like, that doesn't age me. I don't know what does.
PS2.
But I remember it was like $250 for the PS2. I looked at my bank account. I had like $325.
Boom.
That's a yes.
It's a yes.
Yeah, that's a
yes. But here's what I tell people too. Like, if you don't learn how to mature in your no's, your life will tell you no itself.
Wow, that's good.
And so, like, some of it is learning. Like, if I am being told no in this moment, whether it's by God or by whoever else, I have to trust that somebody else has the emotional maturity to look at my life and say, this is not a good yes for him. Mm-hmm. And so even when God says no to certain things, he's going as a father, as a good father, saying he cannot handle this yes right now. Great example is my calling into ministry. When I was 19, I mean, I remember funny story about the Jody Brown who came and preached at the youth thing. He's now my brother-in-law. Like, that's how I met his sister. That's how I met, my family. And, like, I remember him telling me, like, man, you have an incredible gift. Because at the time, here I was, early 20s, and my whole dream was to have a family. And, man, but that caused me to make a lot of bad yeses when it came to dating.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me, like, man, you have such a gift. You may want to consider being like Paul and remaining single. And I felt like the rich young ruler in that moment.
Yeah.
Like, I walked away sorrowful. I did. I walked away sad. But here's what I can say. When I finally got the maturity and the courage and the faith to stop making my life that be the thing that I was seeking, and I really focused on my relationship with the Lord and my calling, that's when God blessed me with Jess. And that's when God started sending people my way that were kind of walking where I was walking. Because my thing was, I wanted this thing over here, but I was also over here looking for everything else to make it fit in this world. And so the same way with my son, I have to tell him, like, you don't understand the no.
Yeah.
Because you're not at an age or an emotional maturity level to understand that this yes hurts me in a really bad way. That if I give you everything you've ever wanted, it's not going to be good. And not only that, but like, you have other people in the house, because he'll be like, Dad, I want a 4-wheeler. Okay, son, that costs more than your sister's vehicle.
Yeah.
Like, we paid this much money for her car, and the thing that you're asking for, like, so what you're asking for in essence is a vehicle.
It's a car
that your other sister, who is older than you, by the way, does not have. And so, like, those are the things he can't understand because he's 9. But if we're honest, we have moments in our life, like, we're still 9 emotionally and mentally, that we need a good father or a wise advisor or mentor to say, nah, man, you can't handle that right now.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Dude,
sure.
that's so good. I love when, like, scripture comes to life because, I mean, literally, seek first the kingdom and all will be added, And when you're chasing after that, God will, have these components to come on. So a lot of times it's the other way. And I myself have found out the hard way sometimes.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. That's super cool. On that, I was reading in, I want to say it's Matthew 8 this last week. And, in Matthew 8, it talks about, Jesus is walking along and he's saying, foxes have dens and, these birds have nests, but, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay their head. And I was doing this Bible study with this guy, and we were kind of confused about it at first, I get this. And then it goes on to talk about, Jesus heals these 2 demon-possessed men. And at the end of that story, the town literally chases him off. They're like, dude, get out of here.
Yeah.
And so, like, I get it. Scripture comes alive and, it connects itself. But these people wanted to follow him. And he's like, man, you can follow me, but that doesn't mean, like, it's going to be good.
So put that into context. Jesus had a maturity to say no to incredible like he said no to things that most people live their life for. He said no to owning land, no to owning property, no to owning a home for the sake of his mission. And I think what we tend to do is, like, how can I make this life that I want fit my mission and calling? And when those two don't gel together, one or the other has to go.
Yeah.
And for most people, the calling and the obedience goes.
That's good.
Because the worlds don't jive together. And that's why Jesus said, count the costs. Like, and that's what's cool is like sometimes Jesus gave people really direct things to do. And sometimes he just said, like, just follow me. And like for some people, like you have the response of the rich young ruler who he gave a specific thing to do and he couldn't do it. And then you have Zacchaeus, who like you have no record of the conversation that happened. You have no record that Jesus asked him to sell everything and to give money away and to pay people back, but he does it. And so you see a different type of maturity when it comes to obedience. And so I think even in that, Jesus shows us an incredible maturity about saying no. You know, I'm not going to say no, because if I have property and a home and all this stuff, then my time's going to be spent on making enough money to pay my mortgage. And it's also an incredible story about trust, because what he was trying to teach his disciples is everywhere you go, you have to trust your needs are going to be met without you actually having to do all of the worry and anxiety of making sure these needs are met. So when we talk about seek first the kingdom, and God will provide everything else, that is a real tangible way of trusting that is that really going to happen?
Yeah, that's good.
So we got time for one more question.
Sweet.
And then we'll close up today.
Awesome. So my last question actually goes back to the title of the podcast. Getting to the root of the issue. When I got to call people last night, like, man, I get to do this really cool thing, and they were asking, like, well, what does rooted mean? I was like, oh, well, we got to get to the root of the issue, you know?
Right.
And super interesting question. He asked me, well, how do you do that? And so I started thinking, like, man, that's a really good question, you know, because you think of these people like, man, I get angry, or I hold on to my money really tight, and you get all these things that pop up, and you're like, well, what is the root? You know, how do I find that? How do I go about getting to it?
Yeah. So I always tell people three simple words: do the work.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about the idea of rooted, have you ever I don't know if you ever tried to uproot a giant tree from your yard. Like you'll see people like cut down trees, and then what's left is a huge stump. And most of the time, some people, they're like, well, I just don't have the equipment to handle the stump.
Yeah.
And so most people live with the stump. They just live with it. They say, well, you know, that's just going to be there.
Yeah.
I don't have the chains. I don't have the tractors. I don't have the equipment. Because if you've ever seen people try to pull a stump up out of the ground, it takes like a lot of work. And so I think for most people, what they're not willing to do, because here's the pushback I normally get when you start talking about this kind of stuff, about doing the work, which means I've got to dig down and find out, why do I have these motivations in my heart?
Yeah.
You know, like, and we'll talk about some of these things in coming episodes, but it's like most people only address the surface level. They say, well, I have a porn problem. No, you don't. You have a sexual formation problem. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like, man, I'm having marriage problems. No, you have a selfish problem. Like the problem, we were having this conversation yesterday, right? Like the pain that you are experiencing, like, man, I have a knee pain. The knee is not your problem. It's a posture problem. It's a hamstring problem. It's a lower back problem. It's a glute problem. It's a foot problem. So wherever the pain is not actually the root of the pain. And the only way that you can find it is by doing the work. Okay, I'm going to have to go to a physician. Maybe I get a scan. Maybe I have him check my posture. Maybe I go to a chiropractor. Maybe I have to. And so there's a time investment. There's a money investment. There's an authenticity and a vulnerability to say, like, point out in me where I'm jacked up.
Yeah.
And then guess what happens? Then they give you tools.
Yeah.
They don't say, like, okay, take this pill for 5 days and guess what? Your posture is going to be good.
Yeah.
But the problem is that's what we want. We want a surface level. Just give me something to numb the problem instead of help me discover what the problem is and then reform. So a really easy, tangible thing for me is to say, like, okay, I had these hip issues. Like, dude, my right hip would just hurt. And so when I squatted, when I did whatever, so I go to the chiropractor, I go to different doctors, and I find out the hip's not my problem. My problem is when I was 17 years old, I severely sprained both of my ankles within a period of 2 years playing basketball. Like I've never broken a bone, but I've done a lot of like tendon and muscle damage. Well, the problem is that if I don't then go through the rehab to get full flexion back in my ankle, make sure I'm walking and running properly, I'm actually now forming how I do something from my injury.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is for 20 years, I'm now walking incorrectly. And when you walk incorrectly, guess what else you're going to do? You're going to squat incorrectly. You're going to run incorrectly. And when you're young, your body compensates only for so long. And that's what people don't realize is when you are experiencing, whether it's your emotional, spiritual, physical issues later on in life, you have to know the root of the problem probably lies 10, 15 years before that. So now I have to go and do the digging. I have to go and figure out, how did I get here? And then once I figure that out, I don't just go like, well, that sucks. Like, I wish I'd done something different.
Yeah.
I have to go, okay, what are the methods, exercises, stretches, things that I've got to do to correct the problem that, oh, by the way, it may take a year, 2 years. And so when I say do the work, it's not just do the work in the moment. It's saying do the work that's probably going to lead to more work. Mm-hmm. I have to do the work of the evaluation process, and then I have to do the work of putting the tools, because the chiropractor can only give me, all he can do is say, here are the exercises to do. Here are the things to do. He's not in my house going, did you do your stretches today? Yeah. I'm going to sit here until you do your stretches. And unfortunately, that's how we view accountability, and that's how we view getting to the root of our problem, is just, okay, that's a lot. Like, I don't know if I have time for all that. Well, you either have time to do it now, or you'll be forced to have time later. Because if I don't address that now, I'm going to be going to doctor's appointments, dealing with all kinds of other issues 10, 15 years from now. I'll just think that, man, as hard as the work seems to do now, it's a lot easier than trying to do it 20 years from now. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question about like getting to the root. It really is do the work of figuring out, why am I the way I am?
Yeah.
Who can I get around my life to help me like evaluate what's going on with me? Like, how do they receive me? How do they see me respond in certain ways? What are some real root issues? And we'll talk a little bit about this in the next episode, especially with sexual formation. But I think there's just so many things that people think are the problem that's not the problem. Yeah. And so I love having conversations where it's like, yeah, I know you say that this is your problem, but that's not really your problem. So,
and what we talk about a lot here is confronting, confessing, and constructing.
That's right.
Which is what a lot of people don't want. They don't want to realize that their foot's hurting.
That's right.
They don't want to confess that their foot's hurting, and then they don't want to do anything about it.
I'll just be tough. I'll take some ibuprofen.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. And so that's what we try to do here, is to confront those things, confess them and talk about them, and then help people construct them.
Take the tools, construct things in your life that's going to lead you to healing and wholeness. So
good, man.
Yeah, man. This is fun.
This is awesome.
Like, I love these kind of conversations. Reed, thank you for being on the episode
today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being our first guinea pig with the Q&A session. So
Reed, the resident.
Yeah.
For all of you listening, watching out there, don't forget, you can leave us some opportunities for future questions and future episodes. We'll try to do a Q&A episode every 7 or 8 weeks, and we'd love to get your questions about anything, life, ministry, faith. Please do that. And, man, don't forget, we got swag coming out soon, so be looking for that. You guys have opportunity. And, man, spread the word. Make sure you like, subscribe, share, do all the things to get people connected to the Rooted Podcast. If it's helpful for you, we want it to be helpful for others. And last but not least, remember, if you want the fruit,
you have to get to the root.
Peace.